Hey, it's me, Rose la Fabiloca, and we are going to take down white supremacy, one pendejo at a time. This is the Sabe podcast. Such a good song. So good. What is up, everybody? We had such a successful premiere, so thank you to everyone who participated in liking and sharing my videos. If you haven't already, please check out the second episode if you're not up to speed on COINTELPRO, because this episode loosely ties into what I was talking about in the previous episode. As usual, this is not a conspiracy theory podcast. We are spreading facts and dismantling American social issues, one pendejo at a time. I've made the executive decision after talking to some people who have podcasts that I'm going to release videos on a 3 times a week schedule. I know that sounds like a lot, but 1, it's to keep the momentum going, but 2, because we have so much ground to cover that we really don't have any time to waste. So if I can get as much content out there as possible prior to election season, which is already pretty much upon us, I feel like it's important to do so. For now, the structure is going to be videos released every Tuesday and Thursday with a Friday night special episode where we will recap the internet from the week and discuss some viral conversations going around in order to keep the ones unplugged from the movement current. Friday night specials will be humor-based in order to give us a small break from the serious talking. So, I gave you guys homework earlier in the week to watch the Netflix documentary The Great Hack, and of course, like last time, I expect people to be like they were in high school and not do it prior to playing this podcast. So we will do a small synopsis and then get into the actual content. The documentary centers around David Carroll, an associate professor at the Parsons School of Design in New York City. David Carroll made it his goal to get his data back from Cambridge Analytica in 2017 in order to learn just what exactly they had on him, and of course others around the world, and how exactly they used that data. Unfortunately, his goal never succeeded, but it helped him reveal the truth about the company and the people who worked in cahoots with the 2016 election project. So we are going to be addressing these key points. 1, who is Cambridge Analytica? 2, what was their involvement in the Trump campaign? 3, how this flipped the 2016 election and may very well be applied to the next one. 4, the power of projects like Alamo and COINTELPRO on Americans. And 5, fighting for data privacy. So who is Cambridge Analytica? Cambridge Analytica was a British political consulting firm that combined misappropriation of digital assets, data mining, data brokerage, and data analysis with strategic communication during the electoral process. Their involvement in the Trump campaign was to influence American voters by using information they gathered through Facebook users. The especially deceitful part of this, if I may mention, is that one way they harvested information was through Facebook quizzes, and once you granted permission for your page, it automatically granted permission to the pages of everyone else on your Facebook friends list. So even if that friend was not opting into these stupid fucking quizzes, you were still giving them access to your friends, which is kind of fucked up. It was like a parasite in the night. And most important to note and keep in mind throughout the podcast is that Americans were not made aware that their data was being taken and given for these purposes. The important part to note about this data is that it wasn't just basic information like where you live, work, and party affiliation. They had us interacting with these quizzes, like the ones that you figure out which Disney princess that you are, in order to grasp the psychology of each Facebook user in order to target their minds with false propaganda in Trump's favor. The data was gathered by psychology professor Alexander Kogan, who passed that data from the personality test onto SCL Group and Cambridge Analytica, which was working to develop the techniques to influence voters. Facebook claims that the transfer of information from Kogan to Cambridge Analytica breached its rules. Cambridge Analytica still maintains that it deleted all the data in 2015 when it learned that Facebook rules had been broken. Of course, I do not believe that given the documentary, but I will say that that's speculation on my part because I do not want people suing me. So, this successful data mining was called Project Alamo within the Trump campaign. Project Alamo was a digital marketing campaign that spent and still spends more than $500 million per month targeting ads and articles on Facebook to specifically selected individuals with extremely relevant messages with the purpose of persuading them to vote for Donald Trump or, secondary, not to vote at all in the oncoming election. The digital marketing manager, Brad Parscale, worked directly under Jared Kushner during the 2016 presidential campaign. Kushner is President Trump's son-in-law and was investigated for his connections to Russia. Brad Parscale sat and bought Facebook ads directly from his own laptop for the entire budget of around $20 million. The tactics, however, proved to be so effective when evaluating the best money spent, which was return of ad spending. For every cent spent that the Project Alamo turned into what might be the most comprehensive and advanced digital political campaign in history. In total, Parscale and his staff are reported to have spent at least $2 billion, just over 16 billion SEK on data acquisition, relevant articles, and advertising on Facebook in the 2016 election. So, this was the fundamentals of their digital strategy. Number 1, the Republicans submitted email addresses of all known Republican and Trump supporters in Facebook's advertising system. They referred to these as custom audiences, and it consisted of real Facebook profiles that were sorted by ethnicity, gender, and home district. Number 2, with a tool on Facebook called the Lookalikes Audiences tool, they identified lookalikes of all their Facebook users with similar interests and profiles. Number 3, then they built an external database of the Republicans' registry of around 100 million Americans. Number 4, by adding these enormous amounts of information for each person in the database, it allowed them to access to a person's site statistics, meaning their personality type after prior behaviors like online purchases, credit card purchases, insurance history, etc. And that allowed them to then segment people into different categories of voters. Number 5, what followed was the Alamo team creating massive amounts of overly relevant yet false news for each segment of people that were then targeted towards the right people on the right occasions. For example, does this sound familiar, you guys? When Hillary was already embarrassed by the emails, they heaped on even more negative news towards the voters who were doubtful of her. So the groups that were the target of Project Alamo were 1, idealistic white liberals, especially Bernie Sanders supporters, 2, young women, 3, African Americans living in cities. These 3 target groups were drowned with negative news about Hillary Clinton. They took her quote from 1996 about African Americans as, quote, super predators and targeted it towards African Americans specifically. Now, white females who perhaps were not as susceptible to that message because up until now have not really given a fuck about the black community, instead got fed the information that Clinton's husband, the former President Bill Clinton, is a sexual predator. People in the swing state of Florida's Little Haiti received a message about a controversial hospital project in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. The targeted ads and articles only appeared in the selected feeds, a format called dark posts, which allowed them to operate under the radar. Smear campaigns have been around for as long as politics. In the United States, so-called opposition research is a major political branch, you guys, but rarely or never has it been done with the greater precision and organization than Project Alamo. So as much as Donald Trump is a fucking asshole, you have to give it to him for literally just coming out guns blazing. Like, that man is just... Anyways, that term fake news in 2016, that term was used as soon as a politician felt he was exposed to a negative review. Trump has been at the forefront of this. During the campaign and later his presidency, he has repeatedly appointed CNN, Washington Post, and others who examined him as fake media. Fake news is an overused term that has different meanings depending on who's even the originator. When researchers at Stanford University were trying to define the concept, they came up with the following. 1. News articles that are consciously and probably fake and may mislead the audience. 2. Articles coming from satire sites but which may be perceived as real. 3. Unintentional mistakes from journalists, like when a reporter wrote that Trump had removed a bust of Martin Luther King Jr. from the White House. 4. Rumors that do not originate from any news site. 5. Conspiracy theories. 6. False statements from politicians. And 7. Articles that are partisan or misleading but not entirely false. Which is so fucking ironic because Donald Trump used all of that in order to win the election. So for the person who says fake news all the time, he used just that to win. When we discuss projects like Alamo and COINTELPRO, it's important for us to be able to make connections. The common theme among both of these entities is how easily manipulated the American citizen is. Alamo was not only a complete disregard to our democratic voting process, but it also had the possibility of providing additional information to our known enemy, the country of Russia. Hello? For those that don't take things like this seriously, but take war and our military super seriously, let me ask you this, okay? Another temperature check this episode. If you care so much about the military men and women, why do you continue to allow yourself to be susceptible to the influence of the government and the media? Whether that be news journalists or figures on social media. Because the reality is that if we don't get collectively smarter and start to think more as an individual mindset, we are going to continue to be vulnerable to voting in people to these spaces that don't care about us at all. And when it comes to the chair of the presidency, that person is in charge of our military. That is his actual job, is to give orders to the military. So when we have issues break out with other countries and we don't have someone who's diplomatic and is able to handle nation relations like Donald Trump, we are going to continue to be vulnerable to threats from outside countries, which puts additional risk of people's family who are in the military of being in war and killed due to the reckless nature of the people that are in the chair of the presidency. So if you care so much about the fucking military, then maybe you should be voting people in who are going to not abuse the fact that we have the best military in the world. Now, I oftentimes refer to Donald Trump as a billionaire's whore, and you will hear me do it over and over again for the rest of this entire existence of my podcast, because his entire shtick is the fact that he is a celebrity, one that is very well known for having money, and he represents a community that was his community before his presidency, and that will be his community after the presidency. His entire place in the White House has been enabled by the rich white men, and his policy and mindset is in favor of rich white men. And guess what? When he leaves the presidency, he will still be a rich white man. Possibly even richer than he was before, because he's put a lot of extra money into the pockets of very powerful rich people. So I am coming to you guys as usual with food for thought. I need you guys to rewire your freaking brains. It has become absolutely necessary at this point to force yourselves to take a few minutes of your time out to simply understand what it is that is on our plate for the 2020 election. This is not to sway people to vote for Joe Biden, okay? If you are thoroughly convinced and are a proud product of the 2016 manipulation, then there is nothing that I'm going to say to get you to vote the other direction. But I will say this. The worst thing any of you can do after voting for Trump is to not vote at all. Remember, getting people to not vote because of being torn by two bad candidates is their secret sauce. If you think, despite Cambridge Analytica being allegedly shut down, that Trump is not applying the same tactics this election, then let's take a look at how eerily similar this election has already been to this 2016 one. Well, look at Joe Biden and Donald Trump. When Joe Biden was vice president to Barack Obama for 8 years, people were not set on focusing on his potential of being a predator. Now, this is something that is mentioned in every conversation. Even I had moments where I felt like, damn, it's really coming down to the war against two sexual predators. Between Trump grabbing pussy and Biden being accused of sexual assault, I've had moments where I'm like, damn, maybe not voting at all is better than contributing to something potentially worse. But see, this is what Trump plays on and what he wants you to think. He wants you to stand on moral high ground if you decide that you don't like him. The reality is, every election, regardless of candidate, needs to be applied with this mindset of this. I need to pick the person who is most experienced in this job area and is the lesser of two evils. My thing is this. Why don't we apply this mentality to voting? Because recruiters do it every day when they're hiring for positions in their businesses. Are recruiters asking candidates about their sexual history? No. They're getting down to whether or not this person has work ethic and the ability to do the job based off of prior work experience. As much as sexual violence matters to me, especially as a feminist, when we are in positions like this, we need to go with the candidate who has a stronger track record of showing up for the American people. And in this instance, that is Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. Okay, because I'm not even sure that the things that were said about Joe Biden are even necessarily true. I think he's just creepy looking in general, but I'm also just freaking weary about old white men to begin with because they're fucking creeps. But Donald Trump, even recently, he's grossly mishandled this entire pandemic. He knew about COVID-19 in September, and he chose not to take any action because he downplayed it so he wouldn't have to spend money and resources on testing. Now, look at us. The economy is horrible, people are behind on their bills, families are being fucking evicted from their homes, a lot of people are not working, kids are behind in school, we have rioting going on in the streets from the bubble over of his aggressively oppressive nature. This man needs to get the fuck out. You know what would be the real solution to situations like this? Stop fucking voting for old white men and start voting for women into office. Women who, more often than not, do not have prior scandals surrounding sexual violence and grabbing pussy. So, outside of understanding how to vote, we need to address data privacy, which a lot of people don't seem to be realizing is something that needs to be fought for. They think because they have a passcode on their phone that they have privacy. To be honest, a passcode is a small part of privacy. It's privacy from external invaders. So my question is, why are none of you thinking about the internal invasion of your phone? Your pictures, private conversations, Zoom calls with your family, friends, and coworkers, your social media pages, etc. Everything is being monitored. Think about how upset we get when our computer gets hacked by a cyber criminal and we are forced to restore our laptops. Or in the old days, people would have to buy an entirely new laptop with advanced subscriptions to anti-hacking software like Norton Antivirus and McAfee. People have spent hundreds of dollars on software like this in order to keep their families safe, to prevent their computer camera from being hacked, and yet we are freely giving legal permissions to sites like Facebook to gather our information and control our lives so that we could do what? To play Farmville and argue on Facebook all day? All of this shit is ass backwards. This country is ass backwards. I should have called this fucking podcast Ass Backwards Podcast because it's just ridiculous. Let's look at Facebook, okay? Messages on Facebook Messenger are not end-to-end encrypted. That means that Facebook, law enforcement, hackers, overreaching governments, or anyone who knew what they were doing could potentially read your messages, okay? These are the things that Facebook Messenger has access to. Directly call phone numbers from your contact list. Receive and read your messages. Take pictures and videos, record audio, change network connectivity, download files without notification, read the content of your shared storage, okay? These are the kinds of things that Facebook Messenger can do. The Facebook app, which is a separate app altogether, can read your text messages, take pictures and videos, record audio, change network connectivity, download files without notification, and access your location in the background. I mean, just recently people found out about the Amazon Echo Dot and how they employ people around the world to listen to voice recordings from people's homes, okay? From your home. You could be talking about whatever and freaking an Amazon employee is listening to your fucking conversation. Like, And then look at Zoom. Zoom is another one. Zoom, that video conferencing site, has recently received a lot of public outrage because they were found to be listening and surveilling conversations on individuals with Mac computers who were using the software. Okay? And while we haven't yet seen what Cambridge Analytica did with our information, okay, or the Equifax hack, all that shit, we may not know exactly what they did, but mark my words right now, okay? We are going to find out eventually what Cambridge Analytica did with that information, point blank. The actual official paperwork is going to come to light. It may not come to light tomorrow or next week, but we are going to find out because everything done in the dark comes to the light eventually. What you guys have to really take away from this is that there is a monetary value attached to your data. Each and every one of you provides valuable information on your own psychology, and that information is collected and sold to businesses around the world in order to market to you, the consumer, in a way that pulls at your heartstrings. I once worked for a nonprofit law firm that accepted donations from conservative Republicans they fought cases for that were against their values, like traditional marriage. What traditional marriage just means is between man and woman, no gay people allowed, and anti-abortion shit, like not allowing a mother to make her daughter have an abortion because she's 13 years old. In order to gather more donations, they would purchase lists of names from other companies that were people from a conservative background and in a certain age range. And it was almost entirely elderly people, because elderly people did not grow up with internet and they're not smart enough to know about this shit. One role that I played in all of that was to literally stalk people on the internet using a software called PeopleSmart, where I had to meticulously comb through each name, stalk their situation, make sure their address was up to date in order to provide the organization good data to drop mailings advertised with propaganda that they knew would rile up conservatives all around America, thus leading to that older person slipping a $5 bill or a check and sending it back. This process was a fucked up process, and I only lasted at that job for a few months because amongst many horrible things they said and did all the time, they also scapegoated Jesus for it. And I just could not with the fact that these people accepted donations from people who would send the mailings back that had Obama's face on it, and these donations would have them, the people donating, drawing monkey ears and writing obscenities all over Obama's face. And they gladly accepted those donations, which is, to me, morally bankrupt. You had to be morally bankrupt as fuck to enjoy that job. And I did not enjoy that job. And I quit jobs that I don't enjoy. So, in closing, we currently do not have any real rights to data privacy. In some instances, the U.S. Supreme Court has held that we do have some right to privacy, but that right has been strongly challenged and eroded and may not last much longer, to be honest. So at this point, the right has already been so greatly modified that it may soon be difficult to consider it a right at all, thus leaving us, our children, and future generations susceptible to increasingly psychological manipulation tactics, which is a threat to our livelihood and democratic process. So, how can we become advocates for data privacy? Well, first, we all have a voice and we should be speaking up about it. We can't keep having apps and companies getting pants by journalists for stealing data, complaining about it, and then continuing to give them the rights to our privacy. Like, come on, you guys, be smarter. Secondly, if you're a developer or involved in the creation of software, you have a responsibility to build that in a responsible way. What if an architect was building a highway bridge and just decided to overlook some details because they weren't the ones that were going to be driving on it every day anyway, and they just wanted to collect a check? I mean, this is like the same issue we have with the police. In our society, we do this thing where we hold certain industries to a standard of absolute perfection, like neurosurgeons, but then we stay lax as fuck on other professions that hold people's lives in their hands, like the fucking police force. Like, can we get some fucking consistency here? There needs to be a standard in place across all platforms. It takes a lot to build a system from the ground up, but in today's society, as we continue to trade in our privacy for convenience and ignorance, we are not requiring these builders to ask themselves important questions like, if this were to be hacked, how much data could be accessed and how vulnerable are we to it taking place often? Second, how will we retrieve the data if an individual like David Carroll were to ask for it? And there needs to be regulation in place where we have a right to ask for our data and to know how it is being used. We do the same shit all the time with our tax money. Everyone always wants to criticize in what ways the governments allocate their tax money, and yet with our data, which is $1 billion industry, we are not demanding the same transparency. So as it stands today, these issues, whether it's psychological warfare, overreaching governments, Donald Trump himself as a fucking person, and mass incarceration, colorism, big business, racism, all that shit, we are out of poverty. We are at a place right now where we are chasing these problems instead of getting in front of them. And what happens when you chase something? Eventually you get tired and it outruns you, doesn't it? I picture all of our current social, economic, and political issues as a game of freeze tag, okay? Bear with me. When I was a kid, my cousins and I used to play freeze tag in our neighborhood park. And when it was my turn, it was hard. I am not a sprinter, okay? I am more of someone who can do a brisk jog for a long period of time. But as far as being fast goes, I'm not a fast runner. When it was my turn, it felt like I was it for the entire fucking game because my cousins and my sister were way faster runners than I was. They could climb equipment faster and they could essentially outrun me. But the issue was my strategy was also wrong as fuck. You see, as I was chasing one person, I felt like I was gaining inches on them, but then they'd burst forward in a sprint and they start getting further away. So sometimes their strategy, if I got too close, would be to have another person, these little assholes, they'd have one of them run nearby me to distract me, and then I'd end up pursuing that person who was closest. But they were all sprinters and I wasn't, so no matter what, they were always going to outrun me. Had I just kept focused on running after one person and tiring them out to eventually tag them, I could have taken them down one by one. Okay, bitches, y'all listening to my podcast, I could have taken y'all down one by fucking one if I was smarter. So, this is what the purpose of this podcast is. I am tagging each one of these issues we face today in the modern world, and you guys are going to pick the issues that matter most to you and you pursue them. And you pursue them by taking them down one by one on your platforms, educating people in your social circles, building a network that is hearing and knowing about these issues. And if you feel like you don't know where to start, share videos, my videos, documentaries, YouTube videos, articles, etc., etc., etc. Make this stuff known so that we can all use our voices to collectively fight these forces that attack us every freaking day. It really fucking matters, you guys. It really does. So, please like, subscribe, and share if you care. Remember to join us tomorrow for our Friday night special where we will be taking a look and review of this week's best memes, trending topics, and special shoutouts. As we begin to enter back into regular socializing, remember to educate your friends on the pendejos we are trying to take down one at a time.